Thank you very much. Where should I put this? I'm going to put it up here. Y'all can check that out. All right, so welcome to my talk. This is Universal React Applications with Redux, which is the most buzzwordy title I could think of in the 5 seconds I was trying to sign up for a talk. What happened? Oh, we went to sleep. Are we back yet? All right, we're back. I'll try to remember to poke that thing. Okay. So by way of introduction, my name is Brad. I build things with React and Redux at Spreadfast, which is based in Austin, Texas. Anyone from Austin? Shout out. Excellent. Yes. It's too hot there, though, but good on you. My first passion is actually music. That's the most embarrassing photo I've ever shown this many people. You can't really see it, but that is a true mullet there. There's a little bit you can see. And I obviously know what I'm doing because the guitar is upside down. I promise you I know more now, so if you're into like guitar shreddy videos, there's an Instagram, shameless plug. And I'm also recently a dad. This is my son, Remington. Thank you. As of July 1st, so if my talk seems underprepared, it's his fault. So I just want to start out by saying I love Redux. How many of you use Redux at work? I'm assuming most of you, because you came to this talk, hopefully. But I just want to say that because I feel like it gets a lot of crap, and I think it's awesome, and it has made my day job a lot easier. So why this talk? I saw this tweet. When did this happen? I don't know. A little bit ago, mid-July. Was asking, is anyone doing this? Is anyone using Redux on the web and sharing their Redux code with React Native project, but not sharing UI? And we've been doing this for years, and I thought, is this interesting for people to know? Maybe I should give an experience report and just talk about some of the challenges and what works well and what doesn't. So this talk might be interesting to you if you have a Redux app and you're thinking about making a mobile app. You're looking at React Native. Maybe you're just curious about mobile, or maybe for some other reason you're looking to recompose your Redux applications together into other applications. So this is kind of what's going to be important is to understand the decisions that we've made, is to understand the organizational structure. So for us, our org kind of looks like this. We have many different web apps that are all standardized on React and Redux, and there's a lot of different teams. And they're basically independent. We have two, or in the past, we've had two mobile developers, a native iOS developer and a native Android developer, and they try to keep up. You can see they're very worried about keeping up with features that are being deployed on the web apps. And so what we've done is added a few people, like myself, who are comfortable with JavaScript, also mildly comfortable with doing native stuff, and also told the native developers they would be writing JavaScript, which you can see they're super excited about. So how does this work? Here's an example. Here's the web app. We're using React and Redux. That stuff goes through Webpack. There's a bundle that gets deployed. Perfect. You guys know that part. What we chose to do is I'll go in and drop a rollup config in each of those repos and make a separate bundle that's just the stuff that we want to consume. So we'll see what's in that bundle, just your reducers, your actions, your selectors. And there's an asterisk, which we'll talk about later. So how to make a bundle. It looks something like this. You create a new entry point, and then just import just the things that you need. So here we're importing everything from this widget reducer, and we're kind of giving ourselves some kind of standard structure for this package is going to export reducers and actions and selectors. You can use whatever module format organization works for you. This is just what we do. And you will not want to import everything. There's going to be stuff that's web-specific, like your router reducer, if you're doing that. Things that are web-specific that you will not want to import. So I want to take a second and talk about why you should bundle, or why do that. Because it's not actually the standard in React Native applications to bundle your JavaScript. Most React Native libraries just ship JavaScript source. Why would you do that? That sounds insane. It kind of is. But the reasons we chose to do a bundle is because, A, it provides us a chance to catch things at compile time. So these are things like There was one project that had a selector that was returning SVGs based on some state. That's obviously not something we can use on mobile, so that had to get refactored out into the component. And so you have a chance now to catch things like that aren't going to work on mobile at compile time. The second reason, which is really the bigger reason, is that a single point of entry provides you some encapsulation so that a developer can't just go require into source of your application that you shipped and use something you didn't intend to be used in your mobile application. So I think those two things were enough to make that choice for us. Some of the issues with bundling. The ES target is weird, but it's not that weird. React Native implements its own version of Babel helpers, and so you want to use external helpers. It also implements async await natively, and that's because of performance and reasons. And so you want to use external helpers, and you don't want to compile async await. And so it's actually really easy to do that. If you're using rollup, at least, you say, I want external helpers. This is your Babel config in rollup. And you say, transform syntax async functions so that Babel knows what you're talking about. But it won't touch it. And then you have something that you can consume in your React Native application. Some other gotchas. You're obviously, if you're not familiar, I'll just do a quick review. The React Native is running in a JavaScript context that does not have any access to DOM APIs or any other web APIs that you're normally used to. It is a bare bones, like JavaScript interpreter environment. So anything in your web code that is referencing window or DOM, like if you're doing local storage.getItem as a default value in your reducer, which you shouldn't do, but if you're doing that, and I've seen that, move that out. Just move that into your components. Anything that's web specific should probably live in your components anyways. So that's my thought there. The other part of this, which is really sort of the same thing, is if you have some static config. So most web projects can just generate a bundle with some static config, and that's going to be the same for each host. You just make a different bundle for each host that you deploy to, right? So you can do all of that at compile time, and that's easy. On mobile, you're probably going to want to hit multiple different environments and switch between them at runtime, right? You're going to want to have some kind of like dev settings interface where you say, okay, go look at this other environment, or just for the pure fact that you might be doing like third-tier domain stuff where this company's on this domain, this company's on that domain, and you might need to switch between them, and that's now needs to happen at runtime rather than at compile time. So you have to care about that. And so the solution for that is really simple. You just move it to your components. This is one possible solution that we do, is to just do the same static config, but then dispatch that from your components and move that stuff to state. And then in your actions later on, you can select that information out of state, and it's all in sync and nice. There's probably some other ways you can solve that, but that's how we did it. Another thing, declaring externals. This is not really an issue so much as just a reality. It's something to be aware of. And you should probably be aware of this with your web bundles anyways, is do you want to declare all of your peer dependencies to be external? Because you can definitely end up shipping like React DOM and you didn't mean to in your bundle. And you don't want to do that. So just friendly reminder. Probably the biggest, well, this is not really a huge issue at the end of the day. You can't use npm link with the React Native packager. It just doesn't work. So if you were thinking that you could debug creating your entry point file and your bundle and use npm link to nicely do that while you're consuming it and test it in the consuming application, you can't do that. You're going to end up copying files on the file system. You'll notice this is issue number 1 when they moved to Metro Bundler. It was copied over from the old React Native repo. So I guess you could be a hero if you want to fix this. I'm sure there's many people who would give you beer. Let's take a break. You will see him twice more. I apologize if you don't think he's cute. He's pretty cute, though. All right. So using the bundle. So now we've moved from your web application who's making a bundle and publishing some code to your mobile application that's trying to consume it. And so You may have only one application that you're trying to share. In our case, we were trying to compose multiple web applications down into one mobile application that is trying to implement all of them in one native app. And so here, you can see we're importing reducers, we're aliasing them, and we're combining them into one reducer. And you notice we export selectors to get at each of those pieces of state, which will be important later. And then this is what a container would look like. Basically what you're doing, most of your work in the mobile app is wiring up new containers and creating new user interface in components. And you're reusing the same actions and selectors that you would use. So here we're importing some actions, we're importing some selectors, and we create a container. And this is too much code for one slide, I apologize. This is the important bit. You'll notice here we're using Reselect. Does anyone use Reselect? How many of you are familiar with Reselect, have used it? Okay, some hands, not a ton of hands. Basically, the important thing to know is that a selector is doing something to get state, right? It's grabbing your state and it's going dot whatever, dot whatever, dot whatever to get you some value out. And it does fancier things because performance. So what we're doing here, you notice we're wrapping our selectors that we imported in a transform to get at the state. And that's because we moved state around, right? Those selectors would be looking at the wrong state shape if we didn't do this. But this is an easy solution. And this, that selector that we exported before can be a simple just property access, like it is here. And it might actually be more complex. And we'll see an example of why later on. So great, this works. We're done. Thank you. Bye. Could this be a trap? Maybe. There's some gotchas. So like we were just talking about, how many of you use Redux Thunk to do your async stuff? So a lot of people. Quick survey, Redux Promise. No hands. Sagas? Okay. I think you have this problem everywhere if you're changing your state shape. This is how we solved it with thunks because we use thunks. So the selectors that are in your thunks, remember they're in your web app code. They depend on the shape of the state that your web app expected in the first place when it was written. And so it's coupled to that state shape. So there's just an example here. Let's pretend that load widgets uses the get page number selector, right? This is going to blow up when you try to run it in your mobile application if you move that state around like we did. So how do you fix this? This is a bad name for a thing. I'm sorry, naming is hard, but this is the name that I came up with, a thunk adapter. Basically what it does is it wraps your thunk, it returns you another thunk, you give it a transform, and it'll make sure that when your thunk calls get state, and it gets the transform state and not your original state shape. And then it also makes sure that when you dispatch other thunks from that thunk, that those also get the transform state. And this works. This is an example of usage. Pretend that create thunk adapter exists, and it does that, what I just described. So you can, it works kind of like connect, where you call it with the transform. It gives you a function that you can then use to wrap your thunks. And so that's what that looks like. You can just copy this code if you want. It's a small function. It's not a big deal. But that exists. OK, so phew, we survived. That our app can now run. It can be compiled, consumed, and we can actually run and dispatch actions, and things work. OK. He's so cute. He's so fat. All right. So this next section of things is going to be less like issues and fixing things because we already got our app working. There's going to be situations where either because of design or because of what you want to achieve, you're going to want to augment the behavior or enhance the behavior that the web application gave you to do something that's more specific to what you want on mobile. And you want to try to do that in as little obtrusive, not obtrusively as possible. So there's an example of that. So on your web application, you might have like a search and filter. And those changes are happening live. You click the buttons, the request is made, you see the results, it's all changing live. But on mobile, your designs maybe have like a cancel apply pattern where you don't want to actually make the request until later and you want to be able to cancel back to some old state. that's not functionality that your web app built. And you shouldn't necessarily have to refactor your entire web app just to get this on mobile, right? So how could we do this? We can use a higher order reducer, a reducer enhancer, or whatever word you want to call that. This function takes, this is imaginary. This is something that we've written in our application, but here it's imaginary. We're passing in a reducer that controls some state that we want to be able to cancel back to. And it takes an action type to mark the value of state that you want to potentially go back to. So like this would be the action that you fire when you navigate to that modal screen. And then it also takes a cancel action, which tells it, yeah, we actually do want to cancel back. Please restore the state that you marked previously. And then your state is going to look like this right here. This is, it was Flow. I changed it to TypeScript because of the NPM talk. I guess more people use TypeScript than Flow, but that's OK. Your state's going to look something like this, right, where your state is now wrapped into properties, marked state, and you just want to select out the current state. And that's a situation where, remember earlier we talked about your state selectors when you change state around may just be simple or they may be more complex. This is a case where it may be more complex, where you want to be able to present the web application's code the actual pass-through state and not this cancelable state thing. Cool, so we fixed that. What's another use case? Maybe you want to be able to reset data. Here I'm talking about pagination. This could be any other type of situation where you need to reset data. Say you have, your web app has an interface where it's paging data, and because that's all they were doing, they're throwing the data away every time you change the page. But on mobile, the designs are that you have an infinite scroll, and you need to keep that data around. Do you have to you could refactor your web application to instead like window into that data. But remember, we're trying to be unobtrusive. Can we do this? We can do this in a similar way by having a higher order reducer. Here is the case where we want to keep data around, but the consuming reducer is throwing it away. You know, we can intercept this data loaded, imaginary data loaded action. We can get the old value from state, and then we can call the reducer that we're consuming and do some glue code to merge those together, which generally is pretty simple to do, right? If you're using like an immutable collection, you just merge those. Or go the opposite way, right? You could instead, before you call the reducer you're consuming, clear out the data that's there to get the paging behavior. And obviously, you can solve those in multiple different ways. These are examples of ways in which you can do it without refactoring your web application, which for us was important because those teams are independent of the mobile team, and we can't just go stomping all over their code for no reason, even if we have what we think is a good reason. So this last part, just a friendly reminder that middleware is cool. I know some developers on my team are kind of reticent to like write custom middleware. They think it's scary. It's not that scary. You should be using it. In fact, these examples, analytics and crash reporting, are right on the tutorial. So friendly reminder there. But also you can use them to implement integration with native features, like handoff and linking. And so we'll look at an example of handoff now, how that might work. So does anyone actually know what handoff is? Have you ever actually used this feature? Like 2 hands. So handoff, just for context, is an iOS feature where you can pass data between your running applications. And generally, it's for going from iOS to Mac or iOS to iOS or vice versa. But perhaps a little-known feature of handoff is that you can actually hand off from a website, from your domain, to your native application and vice versa. So that if someone is using your web app and they pull up their phone, they can actually get a handoff recommendation that says, oh, open this in my app. And vice versa, they can be using your app on their phone and then get a handoff recommendation on their laptop that says, go to this web URL. And that is pretty cool, I think. I don't know why more apps don't use that. But we can imagine we could do this in middleware without changing any of the application logic code at all. If we have this, what here is an imaginary custom module that we wrote, just pretend this API exists, it basically looks like this. In our handoff middleware, we could subscribe to a hook that says, okay, when we get a handoff event, we get some data. In this case, handing off from the web, we'll just get a URL. That's the only thing we'll get, unfortunately. But we should be able to take that URL and transform it into some navigation state in our application, which we can do just by, in our case, we have all of our navigation state inside of Redux. But if you were using some sort of navigator pattern, you could also just call functions on the navigator. Do whatever you need to do to restore that URL. Presumably, you have an analog to that URL state in your native application. And then going the other way, you can observe either methods on your navigator, hook into those calls, or observe navigation actions if you're just dispatching navigation actions, and let your the handoff native module know this is a URL. You build a URL that represents the current navigation state and say that's the current URL I would want the user to resume to if they chose to do so. And that's it. We didn't change any of the web code. We didn't wrap any actions or anything like that. So use middleware. It's great. Cool. So in summary, this has been a pretty big success for us so far. You might look at the thunk adapter thing and say, that's crazy. I can't believe you're doing that, and that it's a hack. It probably is. That's OK. It's working for us, and we're shipping a lot of code on mobile really fast. So that's valuable. Some of the challenges are keeping up to date with the web projects. There's a lot of things that aren't caught in that compile step that only get caught at runtime. Like right now, if they added if someone again went into a reducer and said local storage.getItem, it would not blow up until we pulled in the new version of the package, and then we would have to go back and fix it, and then do it again. So that's kind of an annoying thing, and is just kind of a manual process of talking to the teams and seeing what they're working on. So that could be better. Also training. I don't know if you guys have found this. Training people in React and Redux, if they are not familiar with functional programming, is hard. It takes a little bit longer than I would assume it does. And that's especially true for, remember, our excited mobile developers who were thrilled to be writing JS before. It's especially true for them, because if you've been in that world that's very object-oriented, this is very, very different, and it is hard for them to learn. They're smart people, obviously, but it's just a hard thing. It's a complete paradigm shift, and so that is a challenge. Not insurmountable, but it is a challenge. Some future things that we would like to do: have automatic pull requests. When new packages are deployed, this is just kind of like a nice logistical thing that could be great. And this means we could also write integration tests with their thunks and make sure that everything works, right? Then there's acceptance testing, going one step further. Acceptance testing on mobile is hard because at least with React Native, there isn't a way to do this headlessly. You have to use a simulator, or you'd have to go use React Native Web and render your mobile application in a web view and then use the web tools to do acceptance testing, which seems to me too much work to maintain just to get acceptance testing on your mobile application. So you're stuck with running in a simulator and using those APIs, which is hard. That's just a challenge, but something that we would like to solve. And like I mentioned before, catching more things at bundle time. Catching references to window objects or DOM APIs or SVGs, things that that are going to fail at runtime. We'd like to move that catch to compile time if possible. And then lastly, I'm going to go next door and learn about how I should replace Redux with RxJS, because apparently that's the new hotness. That's it for me. Ended a little bit early. Please, if you have questions, I really want to talk about all this stuff, and if there are better ways to do it, please come tell me. If you're doing this, I would love to hear about that. Thank you very much.